right, here we go. All right, good evening, everybody. Thank you for coming to the Debt Collective Jubilee School College for All series. I am thrilled to have some comrades who I have the great pleasure of actually knowing and I learn from and I get to talk to and once in a while have a drink with. I'm not going to do a super formal introduction to these three comrades, Connor, Travis, and Noel, but I will share their bios in the chat as we move along. I do want to say just a word about the College for All series and a little bit of what we're trying to do, and then I'm going to turn it over to these compas. At Debt Collective, we have this political education series called Jubilee School, where we try and talk about debt abolition, free college, from a variety of different perspectives, and from trying to draw on as many different lessons from different people from around the country and around the world as possible. And for the last 6 or 7 months or so, we've been looking into this question of what would a free, autonomous, liberatory public university system look like? In other words, what would free college and a freeing college look like? And tonight, I think we have a really good opportunity to learn from the struggle that occurred at CUNY several decades ago and the struggle that is still occurring, that has been ongoing ever since, and that is around the fight for a free CUNY, a liberatory CUNY, and a CUNY that I personally wish I could have went to and wish I both in the past and now. So it is a real pleasure to have Connor, Travis, and Noel here with us to speak about the lessons that we can learn from CUNY. And I will say also that CUNY is City University of New York. Obviously, it's in New York centered, but I think there's so much there that all of us can learn no matter where we are in this country. And I hope that there's a lot of stuff that we take away tonight that we can apply in our own struggles towards a free and freeing public university system for all. With that said, thank you so much, Connor. Thank you so much, Travis. Thank you so much, Noel. These are three folks that do great scholarship, they do great research, and they put boots on the ground in a way that they are not messing around on the streets. And so it's a real pleasure to have you here because you not only talk the talk, but you walk the walk. So I'm going to turn it over to you three. The way that this will go is we'll have some presentations, and then we'll have plenty of time for discussion. As we're going along through the night, if you would like to make a comment, you can write the word stack in chat. We got more people. Constance, Gina, thank you for coming. Hi, Constance. Hi, Gina. We're just getting started, so you didn't miss anything. But as we're going along tonight, you can write your questions in the chat and or write the word stack, and I will call on you. So without further ado, I'm going to turn it over. We're going to go with Coco first, and then Noel, and then Travis, and then we'll open it up for a dialogue. Thank you so much, y'all.
All right. Thank you, Jason. And it's so wonderful to see all of you. I want to say there might be some unfamiliar names or some familiar names. I'm seeing a lot of familiar names and faces, and so glad that there are some CUNY powerhouses here. I want to really honor folks, CUNY and New York City powerhouses, and folks who are tuning in from various lineages. So it is a real dream to be in conversation with y'all. And I hope that we can do something meaningful here. Give me just a moment. Let me share my screen, and then after that, I can get started. Hang on just one second. Okay. Can y'all see that okay? Moving from one to the next. Okay, great. Okay. So want to first begin by sharing gratitudes. Definitely, this has been a labor of much. I'm starting with a blank screen, so don't worry. Jason, Mohana, and others at Debt Collective, Noel and Travis, I continue to learn so much from you all. Everyone for gathering here tonight. This is our coalition for the evening, so I'm grateful to reflect and strategize with y'all on the vision to free our universities and society overall. I want to dedicate these words I'll be sharing to David Henderson and Denise Oliver Velez, two people who have passed away recently. May they rest in power and may their memory be a blessing and inspiration for our movements. So this is a year of important anniversaries. It's 90 years since 1936, the Arab revolt in Palestine's attempt to halt Zionist settler colonization in West Asia, and the Spanish Revolution's concurrent aim to defeat fascism that would soon engulf Europe and North Africa. It's been 50 years since 1976, the defeat of the U.S. war in Vietnam, that resulted in massive cuts to social programs here, including the dismantling of free tuition at the City University of New York. And it's been 20 years since 2006, the day without an immigrant strike on May 1st that saw millions of people withhold their labor against racist U.S. anti-immigrant policies. So I want to lift up these three examples from history to frame tonight's conversation with me, Noel, Travis, Jason, and everyone here as part of a much longer trajectory of struggles and lessons to build upon. So for my quick contribution, I want to lay out some vibrant entry points, although not blueprints, for thinking about the intergenerational promise of a free CUNY. In 2023, I published a book called New York Liberation School, which celebrates CUNY's extraordinary examples of direct action, creative writing, and institutional change. The heartbeat of this story was the creation of Harlem University in 1969, when Black and Puerto Rican students took over multiple city college buildings and transformed the campus and surrounding neighborhood into a freedom school for 17 days. This occurred amidst a wave of campus occupations and civil disobedience around the CUNY system, including at Brooklyn College and Lehman College, and around New York City, with hundreds of thousands of high schoolers also going out on strike. This event forever changed the teachers, students, and community members who were involved. For the rest of their lives, their writings served as mobile liberation zones or portable classrooms that were passed from hand to hand, spreading this legacy of Harlem University outwards. This didn't happen out of nowhere, but by people converging and taking collective risks, finding their foothold in formal institutions where they were already gathered, and strategizing to create counter institutions for what these spaces could be and could do instead. In particular, the Sikh program at City College was a coalitional force of Black, Puerto Rican, feminist pedagogies that was a nucleus for these actions. After the Harlem University strike, CUNY enacted a policy called open admissions, which allowed any graduating New York City high school student to enroll in CUNY's 2- and 4-year schools. It was a sweeping reform, but built to overwhelm the students and campus workers on the ground, an example of what we could call reform as sabotage. And this is a crucial contradiction to study. An educational insurgency met with counterinsurgency packaged as reform, even as a wave of people could suddenly access a free college education. Now, through the work of people like Amaka Okechukwu, Conrad Dyer, films like The Five Demands, and elsewhere, we can learn how the CUNY administration and New York government refused to increase the CUNY budget or campus resources and rapidly hired a slew of adjunct faculty to accommodate a deluge of people onto campuses. 5 years later, CUNY student composition had desegregated so much that finally the student body aligned with our multi-ethnic Black, Brown, and Global South City. But after the U.S. defeat in Vietnam and declining industrial power, New York City was suddenly hamstrung by an imposed debt crisis, and the federal government ushered in massive privatization measures. President Ford demanded that CUNY's tuition-free policy be abolished in 1976, even though tuition fees were a drop in the bucket of what the city needed. Black radical poet educator June Jordan spoke at a May 1976 CUNY board hearing, warning that imposing universal tuition for the first time in its 129-year history would bear grave consequences for the city. She said, "We cannot accept the death of this great free university because we cannot accept the death of the spirit, the death of aspirations, the death of the future that will surely follow for our children, the students. We will fast. We will take a cut in salary. We will fight. The possibility that we may lose is not a possibility. We have to win. We call upon all of the people of the city of New York to join with us on behalf of all the children and all of the students of the city of New York to resist this death." The fall 1976 tuition policy coincided with almost 5,000 layoffs of faculty and staff, including all adjuncts, the erasure of recently won ethnic studies classes, and threats to close new CUNY schools like Hostos and Medgar Evers. Since then, despite episodic flashes of opposition from CUNY and community advocates, our university and social programs nationwide have been eviscerated over 5 decades. city and state budget cuts, skyrocketing tuition fees, attacks on ethnic and gender studies, faculty exploitation, especially adjuncts. In this way, the CUNY system has been a shock doctrine laboratory that has coincided with the rise and entrenchment of neoliberalism in the United States. Okay, so what are some applicable lessons in the current nationwide fight for free college coming from the vision to free CUNY? I want to invite us to translate insights from Latin American and Caribbean feminist movements to put debt at the center of education and social struggles. Who owes whom? Whose labor is unpaid or underpaid, and whose salaries keep skyrocketing? What would it mean to strike against debt? Debt collective's maxim, can't pay, won't pay, is applicable to tuition costs. Tuition now funds the majority of university budgets, which means it's leverage if we threaten tuition strikes, and that if we demand a tax for the 1% to pay for education instead. In organizing campaigns, we need to move beyond the discursive, so strongly worded statements and the like, into tangible, disruptive actions that welcome in surrounding communities. We need to prepare for escalations to change the university's social infrastructure and keep our energy and focus to shape victories that we actually want instead of compromises or distortions being packaged as wins. We need to be attentive to how the fight to abolish tuition could be derailed or hamstrung by free market jacketed reforms that actually set us back. So, for example, if free higher ed is funded by fossil fuels, or is only for US citizens, or occurs amidst crackdowns on free speech, or accelerates campus workers' exploitation, this is not freedom, but it's in fact climate harm, exclusion, and subjugation. And instead, what do we want to envision? We can envision free higher education as also free and liberatory. We can and will make universities tuition free again, but I invite us to invoke a broader vision for transformative pedagogies, free childcare, food, healthcare, barring cops and ICE and the military and Homeland Security from campus, affordable housing for our communities inside and adjacent to our schools. To echo June Jordan, we can resist this death with an array of life-giving resources. I now want to invite Noelle to share about how this relates to confronting a new McCarthyism of attacks on student and faculty speech at CUNY, before we then hear from Travis on defending our communities from ICE, and then all engage in a group dialogue for the night. All right, thank y'all. You've got the floor, Noelle.
Yay! Fabulous, Coco. Thank you so much. Um, I'm excited for all of us to talk. Thank you to Debt Collective people and Coco for organizing. And okay, I have to shout out Tierney is here. We waited tables at a pizza spot together when we were like 19. So it's really fun to see you in a totally different space. We've been DMing, but I was like, we need a shout out. So I'm Noelle, former pizza shop worker, current CUNY worker. Coco beautifully discussed the critical historical context of fights for a free CUNY. And I'll share a little bit about my perspective as a fired and reinstated CUNY worker just to illustrate one current fight, thinking about what we're owed from our institutions and how our institutions should be run differently. And one new acronym that I'll share is the PSC. It's the Professional Staff Congress of CUNY. It's our union. We're a hulking union of like 30,000 workers, almost wall to wall, with full-timers, adjuncts, graduate students, etc. And CUNY spans 26 campuses across New York City. So I'll briefly describe the collective campaign to reinstate the CUNY Fired For, and then we'll move to different elements later. Before I begin, has anyone here heard of the CUNY Fired For? Okay, cool. Some hands that I see. Great. Well, I'll explain it. And then second question, I'm sure everyone remembers or was part, I know Stuart's heard of the CUNY Fired For. I'm sure everyone remembers or was part of the series of encampments at universities around the globe in solidarity with Palestinians in like May 2024 is when a lot of them were kicked off, or April. Okay, yeah, so that was a big moment of internationalism demonstrated by our student movements in 2024, and we continue to see repression and acts of solidarity with Palestinians now, and we see institutions drained of funding because of this too. So the story of the CUNY Fired For is very much tied to that first wave of encampments. In May and June of 2025, 3 other adjuncts and I were fired from Brooklyn College, one CUNY campus. And adjuncts are fired all the time for no reason. We have no protections, but these firings were different because they happened over the recommendations of our chairs. And what we had in common was our participation in the struggle for Palestine, union activism, and solidarity with students. And these firings were sandwiched between two critical events. In May of 2025, so the big encampment's a year after that, at Brooklyn College, around 20 to 30 students set up a mini encampment to force our president to talk to them about divestment. And it was a beautiful, kind of idyllic college day. There was like a fashion show outside, there were a couple classes being held on the quad, and some comrades and I were at an adjunct action on the quad doing a grade-in to show that, adjuncts don't have office space. We're doing our work outside together. And at some point, a student invited faculty and staff into their protest, saying our struggles are interlinked. And so we joined them, and eventually the president of Brooklyn College, Michelle Anderson, called the Strategic Response Group, NYPD, it's like militia cops, on students. So we saw dozens of cars outside of our gates, vans, faculty and staff huddled together, and we talked, and most folks said they weren't prepared to be arrested, but will stand between cops and students till they give the last call. And we talked to students to let them know so they could plan. But eventually the cops wreaked chaos. There was no last call. Hundreds of militia outfitted cops descended onto campus. 8 protesters were brutally arrested. One student was tased 3 times until they were hospitalized. It was a really horrific day. So that's one event. And then one of the fired for was fired in May, right before her summer course for conduct unbecoming. That's what Angela Davis was fired for. There's a political lineage to that. And then 2 weeks later, the other 3 of us were fired and not given any reason. And so the second sandwiching event, that's important to note, our chancellor, the head of all CUNYs, was called to Congress for a hearing on anti-Semitism. And at Congress, he said 4 individuals were disciplined for anti-Semitism, and a right-wing congressperson named one of us, resulting in a mega doxing situation for her and her family. So we have these 2 events. One, a demonstration of Palestine student worker solidarities, which, as we see it, is like a true threat to universities as they stand. And then one, a clear case of early and eager capitulation to the Trump administration by people who are supposed to lead our universities and make decisions about our universities. And so following those events, we began a really robust reinstatement campaign that a lot of people here were very supportive of, with lots of challenges and lessons learned. We started off with like a huge rally in the pouring rain. We had a no back to school as usual day where we learned about new McCarthyism instead of class as usual. We had an angry hour instead of a happy hour where people could get stuff to table at their own CUNYs, and so many letters and videos of solidarities from other unions and folks inside our union, including a letter from hundreds of Jewish CUNY professors calling for our reinstatement. We picketed with striking Starbucks workers in December. Politicians like Mamdani spoke in solidarity with us. We had so many escalating actions. I'm kind of getting tired thinking about it again. And then eventually, the week before spring semester, 3 of the 4 of us, including me, were reinstated. And so this is it's a huge victory. We don't know other people fired for the same reason reinstated yet. And the fight for the fired 4th to get reinstated continues. So she remains blacklisted. She's ineligible to work at any of the CUNYs, a place she's worked at for nearly a decade. She and her wife lost health care. Multiple chairs and leaders have tried to hire her and help her, and they keep getting stonewalled. But we're going to keep going until she's back. And so a couple lessons learned, and I'm excited to talk more about this. One, it's okay to have big umbrella campaigns like this with a clear material goal that connects different groups, whether it's those fighting for academic freedom, Palestine solidarity, faculty governance, etc. 2, we must work alongside our students and fellow New Yorkers inside and outside of unions. It's not like an add-on, it's essential. And then 3, I love being in a union, and this was a good reminder that there's nothing inherently good about collective organizing. It depends on how expansive the collective is. It depends on how decisions are made. And I feel really lucky that this particular collective, and by that I mean everyone who fought for the 4 of us, was able to see how we as adjuncts were particularly vulnerable and students are particularly vulnerable. And they gathered around us not to erase the vulnerability, but to make it so that we're strong enough to fight back. So I'll just finish by saying a slogan throughout the campaign has been come for four, face us all. And it's like a typical union saying, injury to one is an injury to all. And I think it's really critical for university workers to A, see ourselves as workers, and B, fight for everyone, especially those more vulnerable than us, because they're coming for all of us and they're coming for our public goods. And I've heard Miriam Kaba say something like this in different spaces, but like public libraries, public schools, public universities, if they take the public part of that, we will never win it back. And so we have a lot to fight for. And this fight particularly has been a reminder that these spaces belong to us. The four of us want to be back at CUNY, and we collectively want control of our public institutions because we should decide how they're run and what they should do. Okay, I'm going to pass to Travis, and again, excited for our conversation.
Great. Thanks so much. Thanks, Coco, for opening up for us. Thanks, Noel, for sharing on the Fired For campaign. Just gonna briefly share some of immigration defense and solidarity around CUNY. I'd like to frame this in a kind of like opportunities, victories versus like limitations, obstacles that we've seen around immigration defense and the fight for immigrant rights at CUNY. The super kind of brief context, what that looks like at CUNY, which is this massive public university in a city that like very much is in the imagination as like one of the immigrant cities of the United States, of the world, definitely a very global city. So probably the biggest opportunity in terms of fighting against ICE at CUNY is unlike a lot of the other fights we find ourselves in. There is a lot of existing like liberal acceptance and liberal support around immigration and immigrant rights, definitely comparative to like the fight for Palestinian liberation and Palestinian solidarity. It's going to look very different in how that's treated by like union officials as well as the local elected officials who play a big role in CUNY. That does definitely create a lot of opportunity. Our union, as Noel pointed out, the PSC, the Professional Staff Congress, actually has really jumped on fighting for meaningful and material immigrant defense from the get-go, largely focused on the federal court building, the immigration court, so accompaniment, uh, witnessing some form of protection, sharing people with the Know Your Rights cards in multiple languages is something that our union has been spearheading for a long time. Definitely is a great opportunity, especially I'd say in terms of like pushing people beyond the liberal horizons of what it actually looks like to fight for immigration rights. Because when you firsthand witness these horrors of state violence in a place like a federal immigration court, it does a lot to shatter a lot of these like existing narratives of things like good immigrants versus bad immigrants, that like what Trump is doing is bad because he's going after the good immigrants with the bad immigrants, that you really see that it's all humans who are facing basically an immovable state violence against them. Definitely, though, also limited in terms of doing court watch as your main form of defense, is you're in a federal building with every single arm of state violence in and surrounding the buildings you're in. So when people are being abducted and detained by ICE agents, there's really no way to intervene and prevent those abductions. Uh, Definitely, again, looking at state violence, that a lot of previous movements we've seen around CUNY, abolishing jails, abolishing prisons, defunding or abolishing the police, don't get the traction that abolishing ICE is already becoming kind of like a mainstream liberal narrative. So seeing that as a definite opportunity to then reach into that space and say the violence of ICE is linked directly to the violence of the existence of borders in the first place, that you can't have nice, friendly sanctuary cities while you have borders. Definitely, again, looking at New York City in terms of a sanctuary city, is you will get a lot of elected politicians like lip service to things like us being a sanctuary city that materially don't come out a whole lot. That anyone who's been involved in any types of mobilizations around ICE in New York City knows that the NYPD is absolutely their violent bodyguards, that when ICE agents are bringing detainees to the hospital, for example, and the community responds, NYPD is violently pepper spraying and arresting the people going to protect and defend the detainee. Even further, probably something a lot less people are aware of, even in New York City, despite our sanctuary city status, New York City is currently subsidizing with public funds the main manufacturer for ICE clothing and tactical gear. This company, Cry Precision, is housed in the Brooklyn Navy Yard. That's a public space that was purchased by the city. So we're literally subsidizing them through free construction costs, tax breaks, and so on, to make gear, not only the same exact gear that ICE agents are wearing. Indeed, when the pictures of the ICE agents brutally murdering uh, Alex Preddy, they're wearing Cry Precision gear in those photos, manufactured right here in Brooklyn using our taxpayer funds. Uh, and also a kind of opportunity for immigration defense at CUNY, because kind of we're a giant public university that is all community universities. Our campuses are in the hearts of the major communities of New York City for the most part. This does give us opportunity to spread the word beyond our classrooms, beyond our workplaces. We've done a lot of public facing outreach, again, sharing zines, sharing whistles, sharing Know Your Rights cards, stickers, and so forth. That's definitely been very helpful. My college campus, in particular, is in a heavy Haitian immigrant neighborhood with the rescinding of the temporary protective status for Haitian refugees. Uh, Expect to see a lot of brutal state violence literally right around our campus. So again, we see admin pay a lot of lip service to this idea of CUNY being a school for immigrants, for the children of immigrants. Materially, obviously, this is still very much lacking. Again, I think the horizons of this, we still need to do a lot of work to push beyond that. Be a great thing I would like for us to dive into during the discussion section of that, is kind of if people have had successes moving these horizons, what other people think about pushing beyond just ICE should wear body cams to like we need to get rid of borders and free movement of peoples as a true liberatory university to stand for, liberatory society. Also, lost my train. Thinking in terms of more proactive defense. There is issues, I believe, kind of one of the reasons I fear that immigration rights is a lot more palpable to like a liberal mindset, is it does kind of become like speaking for the voiceless, or you're a savior coming in to help the helpless. So for instance, we see a lot of discourse around immigrant students, a lot less acknowledgement that like co-workers, CUNY workers, CUNY professors are immigrants of very varied legal status here in New York City. So for instance, like instead of pushing, hang a sign in your classroom that this is a private area, ICE can't enter, as if ICE carries about any law whatsoever at this point. how do we deal with our students and our coworkers who literally, out of fear, a very real fear of being abducted, how do we get them to continue their jobs, to continue their studies when they're maybe in a home without internet connection? They don't have a device to log into class remotely. Even thinking beyond free tuition doesn't do you a lot of good if you're scared to jump on the train or bus to head to your campus or workplace. So even thinking beyond free tuition to things like transit subsidies for all CUNY students and workers would go a big way for material protection, especially if you can get a private car, you can get to places a lot more safely than through the bus or the train and so on. Uh, and yeah, just kind of pushing, and then thinking, especially one of our successes that also has revealed one of the limitations is Delaney Hall is one of the for-profit private concentration camps right across the river from us in New York City, in Newark, New Jersey. I do see that we have one participant here from Newark. So we did do a great job, even on the union level. We had a union member reaching out through it was a AAUP. I could not tell you what that acronym stands for, sorry, or AFT workshop. So basically, a broader gathering of higher ed public sector union members, where one of the PSC members was literally just going up to people at this gathering who were wearing a keffiyeh as an opening way to reach out to them. That we learned about these New Jersey union workers who've been doing this labor eyes on ice monthly pickets ongoing for quite some time now. So we're able to plug in not just other union members, but through that we actually get union leadership to jump on board. Former union presidents and current delegates and so on are going out to Delaney Hall during the hunger and labor strike, especially over there, showing support, but again, kind of is weighed down a little bit with kind of paternalistic attitudes of going out there helping others instead of necessarily seeing it as solidarity. So here are people on strike who could very well be our coworkers and students, but we're just going there to support them instead of seeing it as we need to take their lead. Why are we not talking about us going on strike until Delaney Hall is closed? Why don't we talk about us going on strike until ICE agents are off the streets of New York City and everywhere else in the US? So I think the kind of be the main leading questions I'd want to put forward for the discussion period is kind of thinking about how can we push this beyond kind of just thinking it of immigration defense and reacting to the worst travesties of ICE to like how do we really push this forward into a real liberatory movement, talking about abolishing borders and really reclaiming the concept of citizens, of people who live in the city. The citizens are our neighbors, our friends, our coworkers, and so on. And definitely does, I think, link in to what Coco and Noel were talking about. So just for instance, the same kind of you see the shift in tuition-free CUNY once CUNY becomes a majority student of color university. Similarly, our previous mayor, for all the funding cuts around New York City, is constantly scapegoating immigrants, that this influx of people to the city, as if that's never happened in New York City history, is causing a debt crisis, a funding crisis due to that. And as well as Noel was pointing out, while we have a chancellor and college presidents who will send out nice emails about how they're here to protect students during the immigration crackdown, we know very well that these people will capitulate in front of the Trump administration before they're given a chance, half the time. So So treading that line of you definitely want admin to do meaningful things to protect all of us, but we know that they're the least trustworthy entities that we have in our colleges and universities. So yeah, would love to hear other people's thoughts on this, and very excited to continue the rest of the session talking with the rest of you on that. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Travis. Thank you,
Wow,
Noel.
y'all.
Thank you, Connor.
Right on, right on.
So we have a lot of time for discussion and questions, and I just want to encourage anyone in the chat, or no, I'm sorry, anyone in the audience, if you want to ask a question, to either raise your hand or write the word stack in the chat if you have a comment. Um, and yeah, as Connor says, curious to hear what's coming to mind for folk here. There's a lot on the table, both about the past and the present, and perhaps the future to come. Um, as people are perhaps formulating, there we go. YZ, go for it. You're up.
Hel-
There you go.
Hello, I'm still formulating my questions. Can you please give me a couple of minutes, please?
Yes, absolutely. We'll wait for that. Anyone
Thank
else?
you.
Yeah, no problem. And just write stack too. Stuart has a question. Stuart, do you want to read your question out loud or do you want us to read it for you?
Sure, I'm happy to come out of the closet. Hi, everyone. Thank you all so much for doing this. It's so fun to
Stuart.
see. It's so fun to see so many of my faves here and new faves as well. And huge shout out to Debt Collective. I follow you on Twitter and I retweet you. And it's so important that we're doing stuff like this right now. So I just really appreciate it. All right. So my question, as a former journalist and as an academic, can we have one or some of the speakers address the NPSM-7 and the attacks on left thought and media, which seem to be increasing by the day, which really says that we're winning and doing well. But if they're coming after us this directly, I think it's really important that we talk about this. We've seen our most vulnerable adjuncts attacked. But this can go after everybody. So I look forward to hearing from folks, and great to see y'all.
Stuart, do you mind just saying really quick for context what the NPSM-7 is, just in case folks aren't familiar?
I'm trying to even think. I'm on sabbatical and on summer, so I'm trying to think of the acronym. But what this is this is a directive that came out from Trump, and basically what it says. Oh, there we go, Noel. Thank you. Someone is paying much more attention than I am. So, national security presidential memorandums have much more power than the presidential proclamations. And he's done like tons of those, and they're bad. Courts have gone after. This basically directs all of the deep state agencies to really go after leftists, left thought, etc. And now that they're subpoenaing Democracy Now!, People's Forum, Code Pink. I
Mhm.
don't know how Karen Bass got in the mix. I'm not going to go there, but they're having a bad day. But for the most part, they're going after really super left folks who've been covering Palestine, Lebanon, Iran, Cuba, Venezuela, all of the places that capitalism is trying so hard to get rid of socialism and or communism. So.
Thanks for starting with that question. I'm curious if YZ or if there are other folks who would want to share questions or even thoughts that are coming to mind, any reflections, connections to the context where you are. So maybe we could get to hear from a couple of folks before Noel, Travis, and I share some thoughts and response.
Yeah, I have a question.
Cool. Yeah, go for it.
Does the Debt Collective work in the Southern California region?
Good question.
We do. We can talk about that in a little bit for sure. Yeah, we have a lot of different people down there. So let's talk about where we're working and where we're doing active campaigns maybe towards the end of the call. So thank you for that question. Anyone else have thoughts? I actually want to ask a question too that what I find striking is something that's come up in nearly every single one of the College for All sessions, which is this tension between reliance on the state for free public higher education and some of the violences that you all described today, right? And I don't know, and I don't expect anyone here to necessarily have an answer to this question, but what do we do when on the one hand we're making a demand of the state to provide free public higher ed while also recognizing that there are these many forms of violence that the state currently is engaged in. And Coco kicked this off with a couple, whether that be expropriation of material resources from the ground and causing climate change,
Mhm.
and then there's ice, and then there's all these other things that you all have talked about, right? And I wonder how you think, well, how have CUNY struggles dealt with that issue? I guess what I would leave that question there. And I think you started talking a little about unionization, but also other forms. So I guess I would leave it like, how do you all deal with that tension? Anyone else have questions or comments? You guys want to give it a shot and start to respond to some of the questions that came up? Hey, Alan, good to have you here.
Well, I first want to say I'm loving the kinds of movement conversations where we don't start small, like some really powerful questions that are being posed here. I've got some thoughts, but I'm curious if Noel or Travis, if y'all wanted to jump in for a share a few.
Yeah, I mean, I think
Yeah.
the question of the state is always fun. And I feel like everyone is always like, how do you define the state? And students of like Ruth Wilson Gilmore would be like, it's people doing things, period. And then there's more rigid definitions of the state. And so I think one tension that we experience in the PSC is sort of different thoughts on strategy. Like, how often are we lobbying the state to fund things, or lobbying for more money so that politicians can get more money to make decisions with that money? And then, how often are there other paths for participation as a unionist? And I feel like one thing that ties Coco and me and Travis together, and a lot of the CUNY folks in this room, is that we really we really try to practice that we as workers have control over our conditions. And so we try to share that with students too. Like, you as students, people as students, have control over the conditions of their classroom, and workers and students have to work together to change the conditions of the university. And so, in a sense, that could be the state, and it doesn't have to do with lobbying. And then I think what Connor brought up earlier about like from the discursive to the disruptive, we could think about how are we doing the shift that like that Gloria Ladson Billings does in pedagogical stuff, where she was like, let's stop talking about achievement gaps. I'm sure you guys have heard that for schooling, like, oh, the achievement gap or opportunity gaps, and let's move into education as a debt that is owed to the public. And so, like, what's
Mm.
actually owed to us, and then how are we demanding it? And I know that's like really fluffy, but I feel like we're kind of doing that in some of our fights. Like, by demanding that we get reinstated, we're saying, like, we know you fund us, but we actually fund you, so we can make decisions. And I think it's through practicing in really small ways and thinking that if we can do things differently, or we think we can do things differently because we think they can be better, and like that's enough of a revolution for us to like move bigger too.
Very powerfully said. Travis, what's coming to mind for you?
Still thinking about it so hard, it took me a second to unmute. No, that's like kind of the real question, and I think especially like organizing so long at a public university under these horrifying austerity attacks, like does shift the goals in a sense where you get so focused on like the immediate funding, the immediate shortfalls. Like literally just this summer, Queens College, one of the major CUNY colleges, has announced a 25% budget cut due to a $3 million shortfall. That's directly affecting the most precarious workers there, college assistants and adjuncts. at Queens College. So like fighting these emergency, like there's literally a petition I'll just threw in there in a rally on Monday for this $3 million back. That it does lose sight of like we just want 3 million from the state. Like we kind of forget that we want the real democratic power of a state where people actually get to make these decisions themselves, like where our pooled resources should be sent to. So like the like look at imperialism, which causes massive migration, and we spend billions of dollars to brutalize and murder and bomb people, or help other countries brutalize and murder and bomb people, that those billions could come back here. And then on top of spending those billions creating migration crises, we then spend further billions to brutalize the migrants once they come into our areas here as well. So just like money, like do this constantly, ask any class of New Yorkers. I'd even argue, even at such places as Baruch College, and you would still get the majority of students saying that they would way rather have a fully funded, subsidized education than be blowing up school children in Iran. That with actual, like, thinking of state budgets as something outside of us that affects us does kind of limit that, where if we try to push back that and think beyond a state budget to like if we actually the people who live here were making the decisions how our pooled resources were used here, uh kind of how I encourage myself to try to frame that more often. Don't know if that's like helpful for the immediate term, because again, like state violence is very ingrained through CUNY to the point where like literally like the desks that we sit at in our CUNY classrooms are made by slave prison labor in New York State's prison system. So like yeah, the kind of reshaping of the state and who is the state and what is the state is a real thing that I think is a good kind of reminder when we're stuck in these immediate crises and immediate defenses to try to keep in mind, I think would be a good thing.
Mhm. Thank you, Travis. A few thoughts are coming to mind for me, and I'm really grateful that folks are holding focus in this conversation. There are real stakes to what we're talking about. Um, there is sometimes a way that when there's a kind of government violence or a government threat of a kind of mass repression, we can let that saturate into our psyches and our sense of collectivity. And there's a real understandable fear. I think it's also important when we have a much longer kind of trajectory of what we have been facing across generations and movements trying to respond to the horrors of what capitalism has to offer, um, that this current administration is in many ways showing its hand, that it has the People's Forum and Breakthrough News and Zoran Mamdani and Karen Bass on the same list of enemies of the state. In a way, they are showing how kind of brittle they are, which is ironic, right? They're through this kind of mass heavy-handed threat. It's showing how brittle they are based on the kind of gathering crowd swell of opposition to them. And so in response to what Stuart's crucial question is, I think part of it is for us to not let it make us coward and derail us from the political work that we're doing. Um, Anchoring ourselves in the spaces where we are, in our neighborhoods, in the institutions where we work and study, in community centers, religious spaces, These are all spaces of cohesion that the government finds incredibly threatening. And when we're able to not just gather and reach towards each other with focus, but also try to come up with some really clear strategies for how we could try to wrest concessions from the state, I think that that's one of the elements that we can really try to practice more. And, part of that I think is I'll share very briefly that in June, I was able to spend some time in Minneapolis, and there was this incredible, powerful opposition to what was a military occupation of ICE. Many of the people who were at the center of it were teachers, people who had a relationship to their students and their families. They were a part of this broad mutual aid operation, which was providing food, rent, childcare, healthcare, helping people with emergency needs for about 1,000 families that were sheltering in place for a period of a couple of months. And that mutual aid operation was effective because of how teachers were rooted in their communities. And so, for us to be able to think about that, we're already strategically placed to be able to do this work. And then the question is, do we step towards taking courageous risks with each other to defend each other? And I love Travis's commentary, like moving from kind of terms of defense to a kind of liberatory movement, right? Something that I want to ask is, in thinking about defending academic freedom, Noel speaking so powerfully on the fight to defend the four people who were fired, but also in general, the questions of what is permissible in the classroom, what's permissible on campus, and then in public speech. Really want for us to try to harken back to some of the legacies of CUNY that's also about like explicitly anti-fascist and anti-colonial education. And to say, we're not advocating for free speech or for academic freedom in these kinds of more ambiguous or hollowed out terms, but we're advocating for a specific kind of partisan approach to what we can try to do in supporting each other in society. And so, that's something that I'm curious to hear from folks, educators in the room, people who are anchored in your communities, who are maybe worried, but are also continuing to speak up about what matters. Um, if folks have any thing that they would like to share about what's working in your communities, what are some of the ways that people are wrestling with these questions around making demands of the state while also trying to confront the state at the same time, would be curious to get to hear from you all. And we've got some time, so getting to hear some more voices, I would appreciate what's coming to mind.
Yeah, this is really a set of further provocations that let's keep the thread going. And I think, Constance, if you don't mind, maybe reading your comment and or elaborating a little bit on what you wrote, because I think it's definitely along the lines of what has been brought to the table so far. If you could, you okay with that, Constance, or
Oh, sure. Uh,
please?
yeah, I mean, I just wanted to make the point. Sometimes it's getting posed as, okay, there's the violent state, and then there's our wish to radically transform and reimagine public education, including public higher education. But there's nothing much we can do at all by making demands of a violent authoritarian state. I mean, I'm very proud of all of the lawsuits, the successful lawsuits that the Council of University of California Faculty Associations has been able to make. But again, that's just going up against, trying to get what we can out of a violent authoritarian state. So I really did like Ruth Wilson Gilmore idea that, the state it's just us doing stuff. And if it's not this monolithic, homogeneous thing, but is us, then that means that we have to uh, reorganize the state and state power to be able to do anything about public education.
Thank you, Constance. What do other people think about this? And I think Connor started to ask us to zero down, and that's not the right phrase, but really get into some of like the nitty gritty, like what are we doing in our classrooms? And this call for a partisan education, I think, is very provocative, right? To actually like, let's just put it on the table, uh, so to speak. What do people think? What's coming to mind? Other questions, concerns, doubts, anything else that might be?
Hmm. I have a question, or two questions.
Go for it, and then we'll go back to Stuart. Go for it, YZ.
All right. My first question: how should organizers work within the college system?
Okay.
Should comrades start clubs and orgs within the college, or is that just a capitulation into the college system?
Okay. Powerful question. If you don't mind, also if you could type that down so that others can mull on, that's a big question. Um, Before we go to Stuart, do we want to address it? And again, I want to open this up. Anyone in the room can respond to this question as well, because there are a lot of people in this room that have done organizing work on the campus currently and in the past. So, what do y'all think? Um, and Travis, Noel, or Connor, feel free to jump in at any point, but anyone else? This is a great question from YZ, and if YZ, if you don't mind putting that in the chat, that'd be awesome. But what do we do about this?
Doing that as we speak.
Thank you so much. Connor, I see you off mute. Do you want to say something about that, or?
Well, I was going to say maybe for the sake of time, we could get to hear from maybe a couple more people and then share. And I know there are some powerhouses here, so y'all are being a little coy with hanging back, but feel free to use the chat. Feel free to jump on the mic. We're keen to learn from you all, as we're also keen to share about these CUNY lessons. So really curious what people are thinking about.
Stuart, do you want to pose your question or comment?
Sure. I put it in the chat, but I'm happy to bring it up this way too. I'm really interested in the work that that collective has been doing, and how can we help you scale up on all of our CUNY campuses? I look at my graduate students, who I teach at Lehman College in the Bronx. It's the senior college, and I live and work just outside Congressional District 15, which is the poorest urban congressional district in the country, currently represented by Richie Torres and APAC. And he's become a multimillionaire courtesy of his buying defense stocks. Anyhow, it's as far away from what we could possibly need on our both senior and community college campuses. And I really would like to see, because we go back in the fall and I know we're going to have students that are dropping out because of how bad things are right now and only getting worse. So I really
Yeah.
want to center that and get some concrete ideas of ways that we can support you in CUNY on all of our campuses, but especially here in the
Okay.
Bronx.
Do any debt collective members on the call besides myself want to address this question? And in the meantime, we also have YZ who thankfully put their question in the chat. But this is a great, like, really brass tacks question for debt collective. I don't know if Dr. Brooks, I see Marge, I think Thomas was on the call. Thomas is still here. Anyone want to jump in? Because there are several different things going on. Go for it, Thomas.
Uh, yeah, so I can jump in because we just had an organizing call that ended like 20 minutes before this call, which was specifically for people in New York State. And we've got a couple things cooking that I invite you all to participate in. Uh, One is a day of action on August 10th, where it's where this is kind of like a very modest effort, a light lift of either reaching out by email, phone, letter, or in-person in-district visit with your member of Congress to demand a payment pause on all federal student loans. I could get into the context of the crisis that we're in right now, but we've got 9 million people defaulting on their loans. We've got 8 million people who are being pushed off of one payment plan and into unaffordable plans that are, leaving payments of maybe a couple $100s to over $1,000 a month. Um, And so we think we have a little bit of leverage right now. For many people, the very first student loan payment they will ever make in their life, or the very first payment that they will make since 2020, will happen in October, right before the midterms. So we've got some leverage to win a pause. And then we're also fighting for fully funded public higher ed all across the country. And on that front, we should be getting Gillibrand on board with College for All. She was on board with previous versions of it, but is not on the current version. And I can post in the Slack targets in which districts. Like I see a comment about Richie Torres, who whatever other things he's done, he has co-sponsored College for All. So I also posted in the chat a New York State group chat where we're just kind of like the stuff that we're doing. There's ways to plug in. There's a lot of enthusiasm about fighting for the payment pause right now. And I apologize. I feel like I'm a little scatterbrained, but I'm just running a bit on an empty tank at this hour of the day. I'll hand it over to the other folks who are on Stack.
Yeah, how about we go with Noel? I think you want a direct response. It seems that way? No? Okay, so then let's go with Sophia and then Noel.
Thanks. Just want to thank the folks who organized this and my comrades on the panel. I think the YZ's question is really great, and I was kind of wanted to share a little bit of like my thoughts on it. I don't know if this is okay, Jason, but yeah, I think that on one hand, especially from the student perspective, there is a case to be made for taking control over how student fees are used. And it's often like student fees that go to support clubs and student organizations, and it's done completely undemocratic fashion. Like this just contributes to student debt, and then students don't have control of it. So then, from that perspective, you do want to have like official clubs and organizations and take that money and build alliances with other, all kinds of clubs and organizations that students have to kind of reclaim, control over how that money is spent, or abolish those fees altogether. That's also a possibility, right? But we also at CUNY see just the extent to which being an official club and organization lends itself to pretty extreme like repression as well. So on the other hand, we have, especially in recent years, but actually, but depending on what kind of club it is, like, Muslim Student Association, that's been going on for decades, there is definitely like challenges to being unofficial, like working within what, as you said, the college system, due to how that can be used to further repress you versus if you were unofficial or, kind of underground student organization. And I think in either case, what you want to do is build alliances across a lot of different student groups and organizations and different types of causes. And to think like very, broadly about like the money involved, right? The money that comes from students and that is supposed to fund these things, and who makes decisions and who benefits from the way that these decisions are made. And then the second thing I wanted to respond to is Travis's like great analysis of what's happening with immigrant organizing. And I think it relates to the question of how do we work how do we interface as university workers or students with community groups, because you see that happening so much in various complicated ways with the migrant justice work on university campuses.
in some ways it like reinforces what Travis was saying in terms of like deservingness narratives and, hardworking, family loving migrants are the ones we support and not the criminals and kind of the charity narratives as well. But there are also definitely challenges, and we see it in Delaney Hall too, right? When the protesters get like brutalized by ICE and police, and it's like you were just there an hour before as a union member, and you are called an outside agitator because drove 15 minutes from New York City to, across the river, and now the governor calls you an outside agitator. Maybe you're a liberal, that has never happened to you before. That can be a radicalizing experience as well. And you see kind of the way that working with organizations outside of campus can also help push us in a more radical direction as well. So I'll stop there.
Very, very helpful, Sophia. Noel and Travis, I saw you on Stack.
Yeah, I don't. That was great, Soph. I also wanted to think through Wisey's question. I feel like Soph covered the sort of like it can be contradicting or whatever to be involved in official capacities and complicated, but also it can be where the people are. And two questions that I am always kind of asking myself that I think are helpful are just like, what are you building? And then who are you accountable to? So if you do have a college sanctioned org or something, then who are you accountable to? Is it the members of the org, or is it, the admin kind of thing? And I feel like those are really good North Stars that keep me going. And I also think the what are you building question is nice because it's not what are you starting, it's like what are you building, and it can be within something existing. But if it's too terrible, then like trust your gut. I just thought that's a really beautiful question and something I think about all the time too. Like, how are we working with and within these institutions? And that's always the thing that people say about CUNY, like, oh, we love CUNY and it's an institution.
Love those questions. Thank you for putting those on the table. Travis.
Yeah, I was also wanting to respond to YZ's question because I think that is a really great thing to think about. I really appreciate Soph's thoughts on like the student fees that fund the student groups is like problematic in themselves in ways as well. But especially like again looking at like immigration solidarity, defense, anti-ICE work, that's been a really big obstacle, at least at my campus that's been faced is for I think the twofold reasons, like an official student group, you're like having to register people's official student emails to get the funds that are taken from the students themselves. And because we're a public university, every single thing we send through our official email is very easily Freedom of Information Act gettable. So groups who would not like that could have easy access to that involvement is definitely one big deterrent to kind of doing immigration work through official channels. And then another big obstacle we faced on my campus is just the reality, especially I think for students, that they really want to see the campus is like a safe space where they're just focusing on being a student and schoolwork and don't really want to like face that the terrorism that is affecting unfortunately much of the rest of their lives. So it's been a big obstacle we faced is that a lot of the solidarity work in particular is kind of mostly being organized by faculty and staff at the college. I think largely for that reason that there's the very realistic fear of like signing up for a thing that one Trump memo away from like declaring this a terrorist organization on campus, as well as this kind of much more like emotionally and psychologically that talking about what to do when masked, armed fascist goons of the state show up at your door is kind of the last thing you want to do when you're traveling to campus in many ways. So yeah, I'd love to hear from others, kind of how maybe either or both of those obstacles might have been coming at your workplace, whether that's in higher ed or not, could be very helpful, I think, for all of us to hear about.
So with Travis's call and I think going back to Connor's call too, to say, what are some things that people on this call have been doing on campus or in the classroom related to some of the topics that have come up? I hear Travis asking us, to share out some of the different tactics. And again, Connor asking us like what type of teaching are we doing in our classrooms? What type of topics are we putting on the table in a very partisan way and just kind of like saying screw that to this liberal discourse of, whatever it is, everything goes type thing, everybody's valid. Um, yeah, Constance, I see your hand went up. Go for it.
Okay, you asked what we're doing in the classroom. For the 33rd year, I taught my class on pornography in the Film and Media Studies Department at UC Santa Barbara. And for the second year in a row, my class was the Fuck Project 2025 version of the class, in which the top of the syllabus has the definition of pornography by Project 2025, of which remarkably, or not so remarkably for you all, the very first issue is that they call pornography is promulgating transgender ideology. And then it goes through absolutely everything that they hate that they include under the rubric of pornography. And then I include the next paragraph after the definition of pornography that says this is uh, 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 these are the people we need to go after, all tech companies, all corporations that purvey pornography, right? Uh, but also the educators and public librarians who purvey pornography, they should be arrested and put on the sex offender list for life. This is verbatim from Project 2025 on pornography. So I'm just throwing that out. So my class, we have all the guests from the adult industry and the sex worker community. So for the last 2 years, it's been all trans, all LGBTQ, all people of color, all sex workers, sex worker advocates, and activists, and of course, all the legal people who are working on this. So that's one example of
There we
pretty
go.
direct fuck you.
All right then. Connor, I see you on stack, but I also see Dr. Brooks on stack. Do you mind if we go with Dr. Brooks and then
Yeah,
you?
please go ahead, Dr. Brooks.
Thank you. I'm a K through 12 educator, sort of, kind of in limbo right now with that. But I'm also a mama, and we've been doing some really cool things, organizing with the youth. So my daughter is a organizer with Students Deserve. They organize around um, just ensuring that marginalized students in LAUSD get their needs met. And she's organized like some phenomenal stuff, some walkouts, some sit-ins. She's just like doing everything. But we kind of collabed on a project where we were doing political ed for K through 12, and we were just like hosting workshops on College for All and why it's important for K through 12 students to be in this fight as well, and politicized, and understanding we have so much to win, right? We have so much to fight for, and there's so much at risk if the future is not involved in this fight. The right is heavily invested in this pipeline, getting the youth. And, I hear my daughter and I have a son as well. And like the incel culture, the red pill, like what's happening on the internet with our youth, we're going to lose, y'all, if we don't tap in with K through 12. This fight is not just what's happening now. I'm a millennial. I feel like we're in our prime, but we got to think ahead and be proactive. So one of the things that I think is important is getting youth involved, and watching it unfold in real time has been great.
And Dr. Brooks has been doing some fantastic work with their daughter. And also, thank you for bringing K-12 into this conversation. So important for the reasons you pointed out. Coco, you're up.
Really inspired by this conversation and also feeling the immensity of it. Something that I feel really proud of about our CUNY movement legacy is that city issues are university issues, and also that K through 12 issues are college issues, and vice versa. So Dr. Brooks, really grateful that you had brought this in. And when we have in New York City that there are 75% of high school graduates that come into CUNY, that is, there's a need to create a bridge between how students, high school, but also middle school and younger students are being politicized by this moment, that students themselves are coordinating walkouts against ICE or against environmental destruction or against war. That this is a really crucial moment to be able to think about the work that as educators we can be doing with each other, such that we kind of break down some of the ways that there's a kind of depiction of higher education and then lower education. We are all in the process of a liberatory learning relationship with classroom participants and with their families and with our communities. And again, I want to offer that schools, they are some of the most crucial footholds we have for this kind of political work in the present. And um, I heard Travis earlier speak about that there is a way that in this moment around um, immigrant solidarity that liberals have are participants, and there's existing liberal support, and then also this term of abolish ICE, that there's liberal support for that, but that it might have these different kinds of uh, these limitations in terms of analysis. And really want for us to try to think about, there are times when people make leaps in consciousness. The 2023, 24, 25 wave of solidarity for the people in Gaza and against Israeli genocide that the United States actively supported, that's something that has transformed the consciousness of many young people. And these are the young people who are now in our classrooms, or who at high school into college. Um, there's a way that, because there was such a brutal crackdown on students who were trying to stop the genocide on college campuses, instead of political commentators saying, where is the anti-war movement, for people to say that was the anti-war movement and we need to be building it back up. In addition, saying how we can fund higher education is by not giving the United States military $1 trillion to be able to fight a war that it will not win. And so I'm hoping that as Constance had made a comment in the chat, for us to try to make these transnational connections in our analysis, and for a group like Debt Collective to see the work of connecting with students and also faculty and staff, to be able to think really carefully about this leverage of tuition, that because students have increasingly paid more and more tuition, that is a leverage point that potentially tuition strikes could try to challenge. And I'm a little worried that if we don't have a kind of ground game of broad support for this, and we do only beseech to politicians to be able to pass legislative policies around college for all, that we're missing something. Really want for us to also hold on to the part of CUNY legacy, that free as not just tuition free, but free as in broad, sweeping liberatory possibility, and for us to really hold on to that as we're also demanding that college be tuition free again. And Yeah, sorry if I shared a whole lot. Really curious if Noel or Travis, if y'all have any extra thoughts, as we've got a couple more minutes.
Yeah, Connor's ending with some bangers. Noel and Travis, do you want to give us a last word before we call it a night?
No. I feel like Coco was really that was really affecting and I'm still integrating it. Yeah, I just want to thank everyone for the space and I also appreciate the earlier questions that Travis and Coco asked about just like what's working in your spaces and having a chance to reflect on it, even shortly on a call across different spaces is really meaningful. Because I know a lot's not working, but there's a lot that is working.
I think that's a good way to sum that up, Noel. Thank you for that. Travis?
Really on the spot now. I got nothing deep and wise and hard. No, it is like I think higher ed definitely has like felt the fear of, especially during this administration, that like everywhere you turn, there's someone with a lot of power and money who is doing something awful that you are very rightfully afraid of. And so like it is just really great to even like gatherings like this, even though we're online, that like that's so heartening that we're still, despite all of this, we are still coming together, having great conversations, asking each other really tough questions, trying to grapple with those together. That like, yeah, like that like despite all of this, that I think this has kind of been another reminder of that like nice hopeful slogan of another world being possible, that we're all kind of doing that in our real lives like this. So big appreciation to everyone who came to listen, to talk, to share, and to come together with us tonight.
Thank you, Travis. That's actually a really beautiful way to wrap this up. A reminder that we are still here and we continue to fight on in small and big ways. So thank you everyone so much for joining. This has been incredibly motivating, inspiring, stimulating, and we will continue to gather, think, struggle collectively. So please consider joining Debt Collective, be a part of the struggles on your campuses, your unions, community orgs, and you know that you are not alone. You have support. So hang in there, everybody. We'll get there.
All right, y'all. Thanks, everyone. Good night.